anterior communicating artery, superior sagittal sinus, anterior communicating artery, anterior communicating artery, right and left, middle cerebral artery, middle cerebral artery, right and left globe, right and left internal carotid artery, basilar artery, right and left globe, right and left internal carotid artery, posterior cerebral artery, right and left globe, right and left globe, right and left medial rectus muscle, right and left optic nerve, right and left lateral rectus muscle, right and left internal carotid artery, posterior communicating artery, posterior cerebral artery, transverse sinus, right and left globe, right and left lens, right and left medial rectus muscle, right and left lateral rectus muscle, optic nerve, right and left internal carotid artery, superior cerebral artery, right and left internal carotid artery, basilar artery, suprazygomatic temporalis muscle, right and left globe, right and left superior rectus muscle, right and left medial rectus muscle, right and left lateral rectus muscle, right and left internal carotid artery, basilar artery, sigmoid sinus, right and left mastoid tear cell, right and left superior rectus muscle, suprazygomatic temporalis muscle, right and left internal carotid artery, basilar artery, right and left mastoid tear cell, sigmoid sinus, right and left superior rectus muscle, suprazygomatic temporalis muscle, internal carotid artery, basilar artery, sigmoid sinus, sigmoid sinus, right and left internal carotid artery, basilar artery, right and left maxillary sinus, right and left pterygoplatin fossa, right and left internal carotid artery, basilar artery, nasal septum, nasal cavity, right and left maxillary sinus, right and left temporalis muscle, nasal septum, right and left turbinate, right and left maxillary sinus, right and left nasolacrimal duct, right and left temporalis muscle, pterygoplatin fossa, right and left internal carotid artery, basilar artery, internal maxillary artery, right and left maxillary sinus, nasal septum, nasal cavity, right and left temporalis muscle, internal carotid artery, basilar artery, sigmoid sinus, nasal septum, nasal cavity, right and left, maxillary sinus, infrazygomatic temporalis muscle, masseter muscle, internal carotid artery, jugular valve, sigmoid sinus, vertebral artery, internal maxillary artery, internal carotid artery, jugular valve, vertebral artery, temporalis muscle, masseter muscle, pterygoid plate, nasal septum, nasal cavity, right and left maxillary sinus, retroentral fat, temporalis muscle, masseter muscle, lateral pterygoid muscle, pterygoid plate, internal carotid artery, jugular valve, vertebral artery, pterygoid venous plexus, nasal septum, nasal cavity, maxillary sinus, masseter muscle, lateral pterygoid muscle, lateral pterygoid plate, medial pterygoid plate, internal carotid artery, jugular vein, vertebral artery, parotid gland, nasal septum, nasal cavity, maxillary sinus, nasopharynx, pharyngeal tonsil, lateral pterygoid muscle, temporalis muscle, masseter muscle, parotid gland, internal carotid artery, jugular vein, styloid process, right and left vertebral artery, fossa lucent-molar, torus tubarius, Eustachian tube, tensor belli platini muscle, levator belli platini muscle, internal carotid artery, jugular vein, styloid process, right and left vertebral artery, nasal septum, nasal cavity, right and left turbinate, maxillary sinus, levator levi superius muscle, familiar fat, masseter muscle, lateral pterygoid muscle, parotid gland, internal carotid artery, styloid process, jugular vein, right and left vertebral artery. Nasal septum, nasal cavity, turbinate, nasopharynx, longus colli muscle, lateral pterygoid muscle, lateral pterygoid plate, medial pterygoid plate, masseter muscle, parotid gland, parapharyngeal fat, internal carotid artery, jugular vein, occipital artery, right and left vertebral artery.